Hello and welcome to this new episode of Hocus Focus. I'm Sara Mondaini and Happy New Year to you all and welcome to 2025. And this month I'm thrilled to welcome a special guest, a special co-host, Mr. Dan Updike of the TDP Videocast. And Dan's stepping in while Thomas takes some time to get things sorted after the hurricane damage. And we're sending him all our best and we hope that he gets everything sorted out soon. So welcome, Dan, and thank you for agreeing to help me out with the show this month, and it is great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's awesome to be able to do this work with you today.
Oh, thank you. And I'm very honoured to work with you as well, because you do produce some great work, both on your YouTube channel and your Patreon too. And so for this episode, Dan and I are looking at the tarot, but not in the way you might expect. We're not here to tell fortunes or predict the future, but instead we'll be looking at the tarot as a powerful symbolic tool, a mirror, if you like, for reflecting the archetypes and universal stories that live within all of us. And it's a language of the subconscious, and it's full of symbolism and meaning. And each card tells a story through which those symbols show us some truths that we might already sense that we know, but we haven't quite recognized yet. So let's get started. Now, the tarot is packed with beautiful images and symbols that reflect our subconscious. And when you pull a card, it doesn't just reveal something new, but it brings up something that we've often ignored or we've buried deep down inside of us. And Carl Jung's idea of the collective consciousness is really interesting in relation to the tarot. And he said it's like an enormous sea of shared human experiences, repressed memories, forgotten experiences, and unacknowledged aspects of the self. Now, the tarot connects with this sea of, well, not sea, reservoir, if you like, this massive reservoir, and it's using archetypes that are universal symbols that speak to our subconscious. Now, for example, the High Priestess card doesn't just show some mysterious figure. She represents that inner voice that we're all guilty of ignoring. She symbolizes the wisdom that goes beyond consciousness and right-brained logic. Now, the veil that she wears signifies the boundary between the conscious and the unconscious mind. And to move beyond the veil, we have to learn to access those deeper levels of the psyche, which can be done through dream analysis, active imagination, or meditation to help bring those subconscious thoughts into our conscious awareness. And Carl Jung also talked about archetypes as these universal patterns that we can all relate to. And tarot is about that as well. Now, take the moon card as another example. It gets you to look at the hidden parts of yourself, the shadow self, which are the parts of our personality that we repress. And the moon can symbolize this aspect of consciousness. When the card comes up, it might suggest to the subconscious that there's parts of ourselves that we're avoiding or not recognizing. And it gets to the subconscious part of you to confront these hidden aspects and to bring them to your conscious self so you can deal with them on the physical. And using the cards like this helps you to work through feelings and experiences that are otherwise hard to put into words. So tarot is an ideal way to get a clearer picture of who you are and what's going on inside. Now, as I said, our subconscious is all about images and stories, and it doesn't communicate in logic or lists or words, and that's why we dream in pictures and symbols. So think of tarot as a storybook that speaks to your soul, and each card is like a character in a myth that mirrors your own life, similar to what Joseph Campbell called the monomyth. So let's have a look at the Lover's card as another example, because this can represent harmony or conflict, and not just with others, but also within yourself. Are your heart and mind on the same page? Are you being true to yourself, or are you stuck in a rut? Now, last month's tarot draw was the Lover's card, and there's a detailed look at that card in the December episode if you haven't already seen that. Now, when you see these picture stories in your reading, they really do help you to sort out your thoughts and make sense of stuff that might be confusing. Now, I remember Thomas mentioning in one of his videos that carrying a pocket-sized tarot deck around with you is like carrying around your own personal therapist that you can tap into whenever you need. Now, a tarot spread is also like a snapshot of what's happening with a situation. And I don't know about you guys, but when I look at problems or decisions that I need to to make, I often get so caught up in them that I can't see the bigger picture. And when I step back and look through a tarot spread, for example, I start to notice themes and opportunities for change. Now, if I pulled the hangman, that would show that sometimes pausing can bring more clarity than overthinking everything. And we also have the Fool's Journey, which, of course, is Tarot's greatest story about personal growth and transformation. And like Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, both of these stories follow a cycle of evolution that begins with a call to adventure through the Fool, and then tackling some tough challenges along the way and meeting some mentors and ending up with a transformation. Now look at the Fool here, stepping off the cliff, and he's not really knowing what's coming. And that's how we all feel every time we start something new. Kind of excited, a bit nervous, and maybe a little bit naive. And along the way, we meet mentors like the magician who can help us out, and we face tough times like the tower that really challenge us, or self imposed setbacks like what we find with the devil card. But it's not all doom and gloom, because the Fool returns home wiser after reaching the World card, and that's completing the cycle. And the story of the Fool's Journey teaches us that challenge helps us to grow, and that every ending is really just a new beginning. Now, tarot also helps with shadow work. And again, Jung talked about the shadow as parts of ourselves that we like to hide or ignore, things that make us uncomfortable. And shadow work brings those hidden bits into the open, and we can find some healing in this process. And the tarot is a really safe space to do this kind of work. And cards like the Devil and the Tower can make people uneasy, but they're really about self reflection. The Devil isn't actually about demons, it's about the stuff that holds you back, things like bad habits, addictions, or toxic relationships. And the Tower might seem scary with all that chaos, but it symbolises the tearing down of old beliefs so you can build something better from the ground up. So these cards aren't signs of doom, they're all about freedom, because, as twee as it sounds, finding our shadow self is where we find the light. When we think about myths, we often think about gods, heroes, and epic adventures. But Joseph Campbell showed us that myths are more than just stories. They're like guides for life, and they help us to deal with challenges, and they teach us about things like bravery and change and discovering who we really are. And a tarot spread works like this. And each card layout is a chapter, if you like, in the querent's own myth, a part of their own unique story. So, for example, in a classic Celtic cross spread, the centre card shows the main issue, while the other cards bring up the challenges, hidden influences, and potential outcomes. And the querent becomes their own hero and finding the way through their own story. Now, I want to show you an example of a 5-card tarot spread to show some of the insights which the cards symbolically give into the querent's current situation. So, with a 5-card spread, the first card we have the situation. So, if, for example, you pulled the Wheel of Fortune, it's a sign that you're at a big turning point. And this card tells you that change is on the horizon. So be ready to ride the waves, whether they're smooth or rough. Life's all about ups and downs and cycles of endings and beginnings. With the second card, we've got the challenge, and we've pulled the hangman. And that shows that a challenge might need a serious pause and taking a step back and looking at things from a different perspective. You might need to rethink some old habits or beliefs that are holding you back. And patience is going to be a key here as you deal with whatever that challenge is. Now, the next card, the root cause, is the hermit. And if that shows up, you might need to consider some alone time to go deeper within and understand yourself better. And it's symbolic to step away from all the distractions and focus on what's really going on inside your head. And this inward journey can help you uncover some important truths about yourself. Next card is the advice. And we've drawn the magician. And when the magician appears, it's a huge boost of encouragement, telling you to use your skills and take charge. You've got what it takes to make things happen. So don't hesitate to use your talents and resources to bring your dreams to life. Trust in your abilities, and most importantly, take some action. And finally, the outcome. And I've drawn the sun, and that is a fantastic symbol pointing to a bright and successful future. This card is about joy, clarity, and good vibes. And it means that your hard work will pay off and you'll find happiness if you act on the magician's advice. Now, when you lay these cards out in front of you and think about what they mean, you start to see the story of your own life more clearly, just like in any great myth. But in this case, it's your monomyth, and you'll face challenges and find people who support you, and you'll constantly learn, grow, and transform in many different ways. Another way to use the tarot is with active imagination. The active imagination is Carl Jung's concept where chatting with our unconscious mind helps us to bring what's hidden to the surface, whether that's archetypes, symbols, emotions, or repressed memories. So when a card's drawn, it becomes like a dialogue in symbols with your subconscious, and the subconscious responds very well to that. Now, for example, if we pull the Hermit, he might make us ask ourselves questions like, what is wisdom? What is the wisdom you're looking for? What path are you following? And the answers that you get from asking those questions come from within us, not from the actual card itself. Now, I want to show you some easy ways to work with your tarot cards using Jung's concept of active imagination. And if you've got a deck at home, you can try these out for yourself. So we're going to have a chat with the cards. Now, for the first one, I've pulled the Lover's card. So you pull the Lover's card and you're going to have a chat with the card. So picture this card as a character that's sitting across from you. And what do you think it would say about the choices that you're dealing with in life at the moment? How does harmony feel for you right now? Think about the relationships that you're in. They could be romantic, family, or friends. And how do they help you or hinder you? And through this imagined conversation with the card, you can bring out any inner conflicts and values that you weren't consciously aware of before. Let's try another. So I pulled the Devil card. Okay, so let's have a conversation with the Devil card. You could go into meditation and you could ask it, what chains are holding you back these days? Are they coming from outside pressure, like what society expects, or are they things that you put on yourself? Think about what breaking free from these chains would look like. What would it feel like to let go and welcome freedom? And again, through that imagined conversation with the card, you can think about issues that may be bothering you, like control, fear, or desire. And recognizing those can help with emotional breakthroughs and a better understanding of yourself or a situation. You can also use the tarot in this way as a stream of consciousness for writing or art by pulling tarot cards and letting the images and meanings speak with your subconscious, and it can lead to new creative ideas. And tarot's not about searching for answers out there, but more about finding things or concepts or ideas of what's in here. So let me give you an example. So pick a card, just pick one at random, or go through the pack and pick one that speaks to you and sit with it and look at the colours and the symbols and the theme of the card. And most importantly, just focus for a while on the feelings that the card brings up in you. And start to draw, paint, or write something based on those thoughts or feelings from the card. So, for example, if I chose the Moon card for this, I might paint an abstract of swirls or colours to represent illusions or intuition. And if I took the Fool card, I could write about a journey on an open road and describe the vibrant colours and the sunny day. Now, the exercise works because you have to go beyond the rational mind and let the subconscious mind take over the creative process. It's also great for personal interpretation as well, because everyone's going to see the card differently and express it uniquely to them. So if you had 100 people in a room doing this exercise with the same card, you'd still end up with 100 individually unique paintings or stories and pieces of writing, regardless of the same reference. So I hope I've given you a fresh perspective on the tarot, not just as tools for divination, but as keys to understanding ourselves and also as creative inspiration. And later in the show, we're going to talk more about some of the tarot symbols and layers and how they all fit in with the tree of life and the four worlds. But for now, I'd love to hear Dan's thoughts. What's your take on the tarot as keys to understanding ourselves better?
I really enjoyed your descriptions of the tarot, their purpose and their use. That is right on. And you know, the whole aspect of the tarot being a window of communication with the subconscious mind is such a true statement, and so much more than just divination. Divination is not fortune telling. Okay, this is one thing I want to put out there in case somebody that has stumbled across this video has never really heard much or learned much about the tarot. The tarot itself is a symbolism that maps out the human soul. Okay. If you take a look at the tree of life, you will notice that there are 10 spheres. They're called Sephiroth in the plural and Sephira in the singular. But there's 10 of these. And there are 22 paths that connect them. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And there are 22 major arcana cards. Each one of those major arcana cards represents an aspect of transition that is reflected in the path that it is attached to. Sometimes you'll get a tarot card and you'll look at it, and I'm just going to find a major arcana card here. You will find that it not only has the imagery, but it also ends up having a number on it. And sometimes it's a Hebrew letter. Okay, that number or that Hebrew letter refers to the path that major arcana card fits on. And with the Tree of Life, we also have what is called the four worlds. And of course, the four worlds, the first world is the world of Absolute. They call it Olam Absolute. That is the archetypal world of which we know nothing. And from that, we produce now the creative world, which is Olam Bria. That is the archangelic world. That is the world where things are decided. The power that has been poured into it from Absolute is channeled into intent and will. And then, of course, there is Olam Yetzira, the astral world. That is the angelic world. And that is the world where everything is put into place like a blueprint. And then, of course, there's the world of action, the world of Asaya, which is the physical universe. Now, what does all this have to do with the tarot? Well, the Kabbalah, or Kabbalah, is the lifeblood of the tarot because, of course, all of the paths, and there's 22 of them, on the Tree of Life, relate to the major arcana. All of the pip cards, which are like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth, of wands, cups, pentacles. And then, of course, we have the court cards. And some decks are different in the way they name them, but they're generally the king and the queen, the prince and the princess, or the knight and the knave. Okay. Those relate to the four worlds I was just talking about. So it just helps you have some context and how to understand where things are when you are looking at things for divination or for personal reflection. Now, the tarot is far more than just a tool of divination. It is a place for inner exploration, just like Sara was talking about, especially with the shadow work that she was mentioning there. It is a way to communicate with your subconscious mind, to know how all of the elements and powers that make up who you are communicating with one another. Is there blockages in this communication? And the more blockages there are in this internal communication between the different parts of your soul, the more issues and stumbling stones and different challenges that may not need to have been undertaken arise to become faced until we decide to let go of those things that are in the way. And that's really what it comes down to. And one of the more advanced tarot spreads that is used by many people practicing ceremonial magic and other forms of occult knowledge. And it is a very simple spread, but yet very complicated in the way it's interpreted. And it's the elemental spread. And it is a 4x4 square. So in other words, you have 4 cards, 4 rows of 4 cards. Now, we have heard about the elements being talked about: earth, air, fire, and water. There's also the 5th element, not to forget, spirit. Without spirit, none of the rest of the elements can do anything. All right. What this elemental spread is for is to see how the elements of earth, air, fire, water, and spirit are communicating within you, because one of the teachings in Kabbalah and in ceremonial magic and many other places is that we are what they call a microcosm. In other words, we are a reflection of the greater universe. The best way I can describe this is by using a hologram as an example. If you had a hologram and you cut it into 1,000 pieces, you might think that you'd have 1,000 pieces of hologram. No. When you cut it into 1,000 pieces, you have 1,000 complete holograms. Somehow or other, the complete image is in every one of the pieces. And that's the same as we are. We are like holograms. I'm not saying we are holograms, but I'm using it as an illustration. And we have everything within us that we think is all external. And the more we look out there to try and find the answers to the different things that challenge us in our life, the more frustrated we will become, because the answer is within. Okay. And every spiritual practice that is in the East or in the West talks about this. And the tarot is a wonderful way to figure out different aspects of how these things are affecting you. So this spread, okay, it relates to each of the 4 worlds, because each of the elements is also divided into 4. So let's say you're dealing with the element of fire. Well, there's fire of fire, there's water of fire, there's air of fire, and there's earth of fire. Same thing with water, same thing with air, same thing with earth. There's fire of air, water of air, earth of air. And that's what the 4x4 square is for. Okay? You do, with a very deep meditative state of mind, shuffle the cards. And then when you cut them, lay them out face down, 4 rows of 4. And then, because of the Hebrew connotations to this, we start from right to left. Now, when we read, because of the way our culture has developed, we and many others read from left to right. But the letters in Hebrew were read from right to left. So then you peel over the first card on the bottom, on the right-hand bottom corner, and you look at that. That is fire of earth. It's at that point that you would do something very similar to what Sara was talking about with the imagination, okay, having a communication with the card. Because as you are searching inwardly, it is going to be something that the subconscious mind can respond to. And then you peel over the next card to the left of that, and you have water or air, depending on how you display the elements for yourself, okay, of earth. And then carrying on until you finally get to earth of earth, which is the last one. And then you start at the right hand of the next row of cards above. And of course, then you're dealing with, I like to put water there. simply because when you put water and fire together, it causes steam, and that relates to the element of air. So other people have different ways of looking at it. That's okay. But you start with that, and you have, of course, fire of water, and then your water of water, and so on and so forth. When you finally get through all of the cards, you have a pretty good understanding of what is actually working within your own soul. You also get an understanding of where there are conflicts in communication between the elements within your soul. And the advice that is also included in those cards is to use the elements that are outside of the road that you're looking at as the advisory on how to improve communication between that element and the others. And it's a process. It's a process. You can use that every day if you set aside a time for a daily practice. And it can really help you to break out of old habits, to break out of mindsets that are limiting and very, very hard on everybody else around you, because, of course, we're not islands unto ourselves. And it becomes something that's really important for us to continue to work on. Because the clearer the communication is between the elements within us, the clearer our communication is with what we perceive to be without us. Because everything is made up of the elements. Everything. And as we move through that, we become more whole as people. We become more powerful in our expression of life. I hope this has made sense to you. And I turn it back over to you, Sarah.
I've been upping my game with the tarot by putting it with the Tree of Life and the Kabbalah to give it some new new layers to it. And the whole subject of the connection between the tarot and the Tree of Life and the four worlds, it just amazes me, because it's not just symbolic, but like what you've just described there, it's like a spiritual map. And the tarot cards are like the doors into these different places on the map, whereas in what you've described, they're the keys to the different elements. So you can have a poke around and have a little bit of an exploration of what's going on inside. And each major arcana card represents an energy or a life experience. And I really like how the Tree of Life shows both spiritual ascent and descent as well through the three main triangles, because you've got one of the triangles on the Tree of Life that points up and the other two point down, and that shows reflection. So it's a reflection of you at a certain point in time. And the tarot also shows this as cyclical throughout the Fool's journey as well, if you want to look at it through the Fool's journey, where we start with the Fool and infinite potential, and then his journey goes through all the challenges and the mentors that he meets, up to an apex of a transformation when he reaches the world, which symbolizes fulfillment, ready for a new beginning. And I like the way what you've described there with that 4x4 spread, kind of not taking a trip through the tarot through the Fool's journey, but taking a trip through the elements, which I've never thought about doing that before. I didn't know about that spread.
A lot of people don't know about these things. And it's because, unfortunately, a lot of the old order mentality, such as with the original Golden Dawn Order or the original Ordo Templi Orientis or Aurum Solus or however, is that they had a great deal of secrecy because, of course, during that time, people lost their careers and lost their lives. Some people, I don't mean they got killed. I mean, they lost all the things that their lives depended on, their reputations and so forth, because there was such an angst against anything to do with that sort of thing. But that's not so much the case today, but they still enforce the same secrecy. So The way that you look at the tarot as a map of the soul can be best explained in its purpose by this. The greater universe, they would call macroprosopis. And if you look at the tree of life, that would be from the crown and basically encompass everything. But in the center, in the Sephira called Teferet, which means beauty, is the seat of the higher self. And it is supposed to be a reflection of macroprosopis. And they call it microprosopis because it's dealing with individuals rather than the greater universe. But the more we reflect macroprosopis, the more that we reflect and put it in common English terms, who we really are, the more effective everything you do in life and in magic, if that's what you do, the more effective it becomes. Because your will and the will of the universe, when the more closely you intermesh with that, the less of a difference there is in that will. In fact, it becomes one and the same. So how can it be defeated?
Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you had a nice New Year's Eve celebration, if you did celebrate. I certainly did, because this Annus Horribilis 2024 is finally over, even though the official New Year begins when the Sun enters Aries in late March, but whatever. It's 2025, so welcome to the first astrology update of the new year. On January 3rd, Venus enters Pisces. Venus is exalted in Pisces because this sign's boundless nature that wants to blend in with a partner agrees very well with Venus' character, which can even entail some sort of sacrificing oneself for the ones we love. Now, this doesn't have to mean anything dramatic, just that our focus can shift towards beauty, art, and romantic idealism. However, a little warning is in order, because this placement can have a layer of illusion when the idealism is taken too far and we forget to enforce our own boundaries. In a birth chart, Venus in Pisces could indicate a person who has a knack for attracting victim types, or even who wants to be a savior. Therefore, collectively speaking, we should focus our attention and devotion on the people and the things that we truly cherish and which provide us with genuine safety and fulfillment. We might have to practice some extra discernment because Venus joins Saturn and Neptune in this sign, so there is a collective and possibly governmental dimension to it. Not being straightforward, using deceptive tactics while sugarcoating and concealing true intentions, or a propensity to not want to see reality for what it actually is. On January 6th, Mars retrograde leaves Leo and re-enters Cancer. Oh boy. Mars stations direct on February 23rd, remains in Pisces until April 20th, and finally leaves the retrograde zone on May 2nd. And Mars in Cancer is one of the strongest indicators for passive-aggressive behavior and lack of impulse control, for being a crybaby and getting worked up over imagined betrayals. That's a big theme. Imagine the god of war, Mars, embodiment of fire and virility, masculine to the hilt, in the soft, feminine, receptive, and highly sensitive sign of Cancer. Needless to say, there's some drama waiting to happen. We can safely assume that the perpetually triggered and offended will find even more reason to be their extra fragile selves, But watch out for general flare-ups of, say, those who keep posting passive-aggressive stuff on Facebook, etc., etc. In short, the juvenile or immature will probably go on a Renfielding rampage during this transit. On January 8th, Mercury enters Capricorn. This sign is ruled by Saturn, which means all of Mercury's extroverted faculties such as communication, curiosity, sharing information, quickness of mind are going to be slowed down because Saturn is a cold and slow planet and will be limited by the Saturnian nature of Capricorn. This is not intrinsically negative at all because it can mean that we will all be more focused on inward and long-term processes, on more pragmatic and economical ways, instead of unnecessarily spending our money, because Mercury is of course connected with money and commerce. So it's likely that we feel less inclined to share, certainly not overshare, and to keep our mind and monetary dealings down to earth, so to speak, and focused on down-to-earth matters. Globally, the economy could be somewhat slower or more focused on traditional areas. With the Sun also in Capricorn at this time, there will probably not be a lot of idealism, but quite possibly a sense of frugality and a highly practical orientation altogether. On January 13th, we have a full moon in Cancer, which gets an extra post. On January 19th, the Sun enters Aquarius. This is another sign that is ruled by Saturn traditionally. Uranus was designated as the modern ruler, but Aquarius is indeed quite Saturnian. The Sun is in detriment here because Aquarius is highly group-oriented, whereas the Sun is all about individualism and self-realization. Me, ego. This placement doesn't mean we will all clash with society all of a sudden or have a hard time succeeding in working with others, but it means that it is a time for maybe re-evaluation or finding a new position within one's tribe and social group, maybe a challenge for some to adapt their own individual needs to those of others and balance them. In medical astrology, the Sun is the very physical battery, the life essence itself. So when the Sun is in a less ideal sign, this will likely affect our vitality. In Aquarius case, we could expect a greater degree of fatigue, light deficiency, a more depleted or depressive general mood, a general propensity for anemia, possibly fluctuating energy levels, a more alert nervous system, heightened sensitivity for electromagnetic fields, which could be quite serious for some since we are dealing with severe solar activity at the moment, or any form of barometric change could also affect people a little more than usual. Too much work in front of the computer could be especially draining, especially for those who have a predisposition with Aquarius themes in their chart. Along with low blood pressure and other typical Aquarius ailments, this does not mean at all that each and every one of us will experience these things. However, there is a collective tendency towards these areas because of the Sun's placement, which affects everyone to a certain degree. It's also extremely typical for this time of year to feel weakened in general by the long winter months and therefore to become more receptive of subtle changes. What we can do is what common sense will dictate for this time of year, which is to strengthen our immune systems. Do not sit indoors all day, try to go for walks and such. Maybe take some vitamin D or other supplements if you need to, and do your best to just look after yourself. People get sick during this time precisely because their battery is being drained more easily, and therefore the body doesn't have its normal resilience. So do whatever you can to build your resilience. On January 28th, Mercury enters Aquarius. This sign symbolizes the socially oriented, creative, and innovative thinker, and Mercury, representing the mind, expresses itself in these Aquarian ways, meaning our focus could shift from being a bit of a frugal, hardworking, and introverted loner towards more freedom, fresh approaches to money, business, or communication, and maybe a collective rise in awareness for such themes. With Aquarius being the maverick of modern technology, the internet and cryptocurrency, there could be a greater rush towards Bitcoin, for instance. The normies could all of a sudden get panicky about it or something. For example, a more prominent endorsement or acceptance on the global stage, or a greater emphasis on artificial intelligence, and so forth. Health-wise, Mercury as the nervous system's messenger is exalted in Aquarius, which can be a bit hyperactive. Feeling high-strung and more so than usual, muscle or nerve pains, fluctuations within the body's electricity, again, greater sensitivity for electromagnetic fields or a disturbed circulation are typical symptoms associated with Mercury in Aquarius, and in conjunction with the Sun in the same sign, this could definitely affect predisposed individuals. Again, predisposed. This does not mean everybody will suffer from all kinds of nonsense. Overall, it could be like a mini Mercury retrograde in terms of tech issues, especially in the first degrees when it's conjunct Pluto, but throughout its entire transit because it stays pretty closely conjunct to the Sun. On January 29th, we have a new moon in Aquarius, which also gets an extra post as usual. On January 30th, Uranus goes direct in Taurus. This is most likely a collective, globally felt thing and not so much a personal one, as Uranus is a generational planet. Uranus is the disruptor of balances, the revolutionary in the positive sense, or the chaotic trickster in the negative. In Taurus, our physical and material comfort is affected, including financial safety. And square the aforementioned planets in Aquarius, there might be a surprising, unexpected event surrounding tech, maybe crypto, the internet, possibly a cyber attack or a glitch in the matrix. No, a glitch of some sort with wide-reaching effects. This is not a prediction, this is simply a possibility given this particular placement. I hope you have a pleasant January, and whatever may be going on in the world, you manage to stay focused on your own path and your own goals and priorities, and most importantly for this time of year, your health. So, see you next month.
With the tarot cards, they can be placed on the pathways of the tree of life, coming down from the crown, from Kether, and down, which is the crown, and Chokmah, wisdom, and so on. Do you have to follow that zigzagged line when working through the tarot using the tree of life, or can you go the other way? Can you go from the bottom up, or do you need to come from the top down?
You can actually begin work with the tarot on the tree of life anywhere. Unless you're, well, I won't say unless, but I'll say if you want to do magic with the tarot, for instance, you want to use the tarot symbolism in ritual magic. At that point, you would want to work in what they call the path of the flaming sword, which would be in order from Kether, the crown, all the way to Malkuth, because that's how energy moves on the pathway of manifestation into the world of experience. If you are attempting to learn about yourself, and more than just going through meditations, but an actual practice. And by the way, for those that want to know why some folks practice things like ceremonial magic and so forth, well, the main reason is actually not what you might think. It's to go on the path of return to connect with the source of all things. And in doing so, learn everything you can about yourself by going in the reverse order of the path of the flaming sword. And that's where the original Rosicrucian and Golden Dawn grade system came from. Now, there's multiple ways that you can use the tarot to learn about yourself, and you can start wherever your intuition tells you to start. what I just described previously was for particular structured practice, and not everybody is involved in that. So it depends what you're wanting to do, but it's very potent, especially if you are open to the possibilities.
Path working is a good start, I think, especially if you're beginning to look at the tarot from this perspective. So with path working, you're stepping into the tarot itself. So you're not just reading the cards, you're experiencing them. And I've been doing some of that tarot path working, and it is quite psychological. And the four worlds of the Tree of Life reminds me a lot of how the subconscious works, especially when using the active imagination, which is how I path work. So if you compare it with the four worlds in the Tree of Life, everything starts at, now excuse my pronunciation here, Atzulith. I got that right, Atziluth.
Yes.
Which is the spiritual realm of pure potential, which is like Jung's collective unconsciousness, where the archetypes and all those deeper truths and wisdoms exist, the place that we know that we don't know of in the physical. And then things move on to Bria, which is the creative world. And that's when emotions and symbols start to take form, like when they come up in dreams or meditation. And then it goes on to Yetzirah, the world of thought and formation. And we start to understand the symbols then through our inner dialogue, through having the conversations with these imagined figures in the active imagination examples that I gave earlier. And then everything manifests in Asaya, the physical world, where all that internal work that we've done comes to the physical through our actions or decisions or creative work or whatever it is that we use to bring it out from the no thing, if you like, into the physical. So working with the four worlds is exploring the subconsciousness, moving from unseen inspiration to conscious understanding, and finally bringing that change into the physical world, which is another definition for magic.
And here's something too. I kind of agree with Crowley on this. Every act is a magical act. If that weren't the case, we wouldn't be alive. Because even today, scientists can tell us what makes up a living being, but they cannot tell you what makes it actually alive. And the answer to that is actually consciousness makes it alive. And one of the things that I found too, I just want to throw this in here, I just felt that I should. A lot of people have a problem meditating because they think that they have to silence everything in their head and have absolutely no thinking process at all. This is actually not accurate. It's not thinking in words, you see, because the subconscious mind and the universe doesn't speak words. We hear words sometimes, if that's the only way we're going to listen, but it uses imagery, it uses emotion. And so one of the ways that you can practice getting yourself into a better meditative state is to take a card. I'm just pulling one at random here from my little deck. Okay, just take a card. And the more complex, the better. Look at that card. Don't strain at it. You know, you're not trying to burst a blood vessel. Just take a look at it, absorb it, until you can kind of hold that image in your mind's eye when you close your eyes. Then close your eyes, being totally involved in your mind's eye with that image, and then slowly start taking pieces away from it, like pieces out of a jigsaw puzzle. Until finally, when the last piece is taken, because you've been so absorbed in this whole process, the egoic mind, which is the chatterbox, doesn't know what to do for a second or so. That is the silence where even for a brief moment, you can experience very deep communication. And that deep communication is likely going to be in imagery and emotion. And, just simple things like that. Because, people talk about will, and when I talk about will in the TDP or any other place, I'm not talking about the strength and willpower to pull or push a wheelbarrow full of bricks up a 40-degree angle hill. That's useful, but doesn't help you much in magic. It doesn't help you much in meditation. What it is, when I say will, is how long you can focus on a single thing without interruption. Internal interruption. And it doesn't matter how much a person sucks at it when they start, it always improves with repetition and doing different things with it to make it fun.
Can I just bring a little bit of hermeticism into the conversation here?
Sure.
Because I've been learning quite a lot about that through yourself, actually, through the Patreon that you run. And the Hermetic principle of as above, so below, I think also becomes apparent when you look at the tarot through the Tree of Life, because each major arcana card symbolizes a spiritual archetype, which represents a universal force, like something like love or justice or change. But then on a personal level, the card also can show us our inner struggles, triumphs, and spiritual growth and humanity. So the tarot kind of bridges the concept of the above being the above of the divine or the universe or whatever you want to refer to it as, that inspiration that comes from the no-thing. And the below is the real world of experience. So we're taking out those aspects of the no-thing and bringing them into the physical. And I just was looking at that through the eyes of Hermeticism, because there's so many different systems and things that you can bring into the tarot, and they all work.
Yes, they do. And, it's not like one system is better than another. It's which one works for you. And you know what? They're even, I don't want to call them systems, but they are, I guess, individual systems. There's people that do things related to what they call chaos magic. Now, chaos magic is not chaos, like something out of Transformers or something. What we're talking about in that is how whatever you put your thought and energy into can become a tool of effective power for you. It doesn't have to be because some grand poobah 200 years ago said so, but because you understood the principle and then you adapted whatever to suit how your mind works. Because that's key. That's one of the reasons for meditation too, is not just connecting alone with the source of all things, but also understanding what that means for us here as expressions of that source. And how we relate to that source is not up to somebody in some organization somewhere. It's up to you. But that's why it says it said in at the Temple of Delphi, know thyself. That is the key to all magic and life. Know yourself. Know who you really are. Because then you're not, and I believe it was Carl Jung that said this too, if you do not make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Would you not much rather have more deliberate control. Just saying.
I've been speaking to many fascinating guests on my podcast, The Caffeine Chronicles, and they've all given me plenty of food for thought recently. And I've had the pleasure of chatting with Neil MacDonald, who runs Megalithic Tours, and he's written a new book on the Western Mystery Tradition and how to apply it to your life. And that conversation, along with his book, really sparked something in me and set me off on a rediscovered journey into consciousness. And I've been devouring books on the subject and staying up until the wee small hours. So, for this month's Psychic Hygiene, I want to look at the subconscious, that hidden part of our consciousness that stores all of our beliefs, emotions, and memories, many of which we may not even be aware of. And it's a doorway to your untapped potential. And the more you interact with it, the more it's going to show you. Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, introduced the concept of the collective unconscious. And he believed that we all tap into a shared pool of experiences, symbols, and archetypes, the universal wisdom that connects us all across time and space. And this collective unconscious constantly influences our thoughts, decisions, and perceptions. And you can access this vast store of knowledge by talking with your subconscious, but it doesn't speak the same language as your waking mind. It communicates through symbols, dreams, feelings, and gut instincts. So when you're seeking guidance, turn to your inner self and ask questions like, subconscious, what am I supposed to learn from this situation? Or what do I need to let go of? And the more you talk with your inner world, the clearer the messages become. And you can use the subconscious to access the universal information field, which is a field of knowledge that contains everything that ever was, is, and ever will be. You could call it the Akasha, the morphogenetic field, or even the great cosmic database. But whatever you want to call it, it's filled with insights, and it's there to make use of. You can access this vast area of knowledge using daydreaming, dream analysis, or even working with archetypes. You could say it's like your personal Wi-Fi to the cosmos, but sometimes we feel disconnected from our subconscious because information overload from social media, the news, and the constant mass of digital stimuli can cloud our inner voice. And you're not alone if you've been feeling out of touch with your deeper self or the universal information field. The digital age bombards us with so much data that it's hard to hear that quiet space within. So how do you reconnect? Well, you can start by creating space and stepping back from the noise by finding some time to just be present. This might mean putting down the phone, taking a break from social media, or finding a quiet moment with no distractions. The universal information field, or Akasha, is always there, but it's much harder to tap into when you're overwhelmed by external influences. Here's a few techniques I use to open up my subconscious. I read books about the subject, and there's plenty out there, and I'm reviewing one that I've just finished in the book review section later on, so stay tuned for that. You can meditate, but start small. Even 5 minutes a day can help quiet your mind and allow space for insights to come through. Focus on your breath and feel your body and let go of external chatter. Meditation doesn't mean you're emptying your mind. What I'm talking about is to relax and let your mind wander, like daydreaming. And in that relaxed state, your subconscious will begin to speak to you. You can do some dream work because the subconscious speaks to us through dreams. So if you're working with your subconscious, pay close attention to your dreams and keep a dream journal by your bed and write down whatever you remember as soon as you wake up, and you'll begin to notice patterns or themes that guide you towards a better understanding and insight of what's going on. You can spend time in nature because nature is one of the best ways to ground yourself and reconnect with the universal flow of life. Now, I woke up the other morning feeling off, probably due to a bad sleep cycle or a dream. But after a brisk walk in the cold air, I felt completely different, and it turned the whole day around because nature helps you clear your mind of cobwebs and to hear your inner voice more clearly. It's also digital detoxes, and I also set intentional digital detox periods regularly, even just for a few hours a day, where I turn off notifications or I log off social media and avoid the news. During this time, I work on things like this show, but I also use my offline hours to read, daydream, reflect, contemplate, or do a tarot spread. Remember, your subconscious holds the key to the answers that you seek, and the collective unconscious is a big library of knowledge and insight. So learn to tap into it, and you'll find the guidance that you need for whatever happens in life. The answers you're looking for are already within you. And that's my psychic hygiene suggestion for this month.
Hello everybody, my name is Debbie and I recently went to Mars. In the Greenwich Painted Hall in South East London, there is an art installation currently being exhibited by Luke Jerram. This is the third part of his trilogy where he'd once done the Moon, the Earth, and now Mars is on display. I found this quite mesmerising. What is Mars, the planet Mars? For many of us, we think about Mars, the god of war from the Greek pantheon. And it is quite interesting that in just after 2020, I noticed that the planet Mars was glowing very red in the sky, much redder, brighter, darker red, like a blood red, than I'd ever seen it done before. And then within a year, wars started out throughout the world. Now, I know there are different wars occurring in different parts of the world all the time, but I think it became more obvious for us stargazers that Mars was warning us that war was coming, because it was going to be a war that was more likely to affect us here in the Western world. Mars is often regarded as the planet of war, and in the Rudolf Steiner's lectures, which are part of anthroposophy, he talks about how Christian Rosenkreuz, the founder of the Rosicrucian stream, had to send Buddha, after he became enlightened, to Mars to help out with the savagery and warlike antics going on between the different tribes of the Martians. Now, where were the Martian civilizations living? And are they still there today? I believe they're underground. But Luke Jerram's done a fantastic portrait of all the craters, the marks that are on the planet Mars, though I could not see the face on Mars, which apparently is in the Sardonia part of Mars, located, I think it's halfway between a couple of craters, but that wasn't being shown on here, though I did see the shadow of the supposed obelisk. There is said to be an obelisk on Mars, and the only way they have been able to tell that this obelisk is there and that it's very, very tall is because of the shadow, though this shadow seems to represent something rectangular and very tall. Many think of it as being a monolith, which reminds one of Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey, and all those monoliths appearing everywhere, and then recently we've had them appearing as apparently art installations. But one of the things about looking at this installation by Luke Jerram is that it gives one time to meditate upon the planet Mars, perhaps send it some peace and love. We don't really want to be all going into war. Maybe we need to try and get Mars to transform from a planet of indicating war is on its way to a planet that is full of love and light, and try and help us humans to stop warring. Elon Musk's plan to colonize Mars with humans. I wonder what the Martians would think of that. And those who want to leave it and go and live on Mars, well, let's let them do that. And let's not let them come back. I recommend going to see Mars, but the planet Earth is the place to be.
When we do this work, I don't know about you, but I use the Rider-Waite cards because I'm quite familiar with the symbolism on those, and I find that my mind connects with these a lot easier than some of the other cards out there. In your personal experience, what do you prefer? And what do you use these, or have you got your own favorite deck? I mean, I've worked with other decks. I've worked with novelty decks, and I can't get anything from them. They're just nice to look at. But this I always end up coming back to this one. So I just wondered if you've got a favourite.
For general work with the tarot, I like the Rider-Waite deck as well. I also have two other decks that I will use. I have an actual Golden Dawn tarot deck, which I like for more magical purposes because their color system is what they call flashing colors. So green and red, for instance, a good example, are actually the same color on the opposite ends of the spectrum. You can see this very clearly if you take an image, a triangle or a square or something that's red, and you just look at it for a while, and then take it away and look directly at a blank whitish wall, you'll see sort of like a trailer image just for an instant of a green square. The same thing happens with water, blue and orange. Okay. For air, yellow and violet. For earth, either black or green or citron, olive, russet, and black. Okay. Because it's a mixture of all the elements. But I think for doing shadow work, a deck that I got called the Luciferian Tarot is very good. It's based on the Qliphoth, which is the dark side of the Tree of Life. And it is the opposite of everything that the Tree of Life represents. However, that is a part of our soul too. And if we do not expose, and as I just quoted, I believe Carl Jung earlier, if we do not take that which is unconscious and make it conscious, it will rule over us and we won't know what's going on. And I would rather have different aspects of my soul that love to do nothing, and everybody has this aspect of their soul, to sabotage everything you're trying to do and make your life bitter and miserable. I'd rather have that under control than doing what I want it to do, rather than running amok. And so if you take a look and realize you have a right hand and you have a left hand, you need to have them both come together so that together they may be synthesized into something that is actually beautiful, rather than going to the extreme of one against the other. That's the trick of polarity. We need to be beyond that to understand who we are, because we are a part of the all, and the all is everything, including the shadow. And when we understand that, we can begin to balance things within us, rather than ending up in the most ridiculous fight that we can never win, the one against ourselves. We have to put our weapons down when it comes to our own inner conflicts and start bringing things together, healing things that have been harmed, strengthening things that have been weakened, so that we can become more than what we were, because that's why we're here. It's not all the fancy things that a lot of Hollywood movies would tell you about. No, we're here to become something, and what that something is the most perfect expression that we can do. The universe doesn't hate you. We do a lot of the stuff, even the most dark stuff in the whole world, to ourselves because of ignorance of who we are. And that's, I know, been my goal, to try and help open eyes so that the healing can begin, because this world needs it now more than ever.
And the cards are a fantastic set of keys to help people start on that healing journey and bring some of those shadow aspects that are repressed out into the conscious mind so that you can work on them. I suppose it's a little bit like, the analogy you could give it would be, if you repress your emotions and you don't let it out, it stays inside and eventually it becomes detrimental to the physical because it'll express itself as a disease, and then you become ill and you become sick. So it's a similar kind of thing, but more at a soul level, like a soul sickness, if you like, if you don't face the shadow self and you don't do work on it, you don't acknowledge it. So like you said about, if you were somebody that would like to spend the days doing nothing and self-sabotaging yourself, if you admit that side of yourself, then you can say, yeah, this is part of me. I procrastinate. I can be a bit lazy sometimes. I put things off. I don't talk to myself very nicely inside. And then you can think, well, maybe now I recognize that I do that and I'm not ignoring it and I'm not saying, I don't do that, everybody else does that. When you admit to yourself that you do, then you can take steps, small steps, to improve on that and stop doing it eventually.
Yes. Because if we don't have that knowledge, it's almost impossible to do anything that's consciously directed to work on it. We have to accept what is before we can change things to something new. Just like if you don't know where you are, you can have all the maps in the world, but if you don't know where you are, you could be in Madagascar and think you're in Canada. All right. And you will never get where you're going. But if you know where you are and you have a map, and we do have a map, then you could figure out where you're going and how to get there. That's where the egoic mind's interpretation process is important. You know, the egoic mind, the self of I, the part that is who we've been told that we are, is not the leader. It's supposed to help. But the leader is our true self. And it's in that connection that then we accept what is, and with that knowledge can say, okay, this may have served me umpteen dozen years ago. Doesn't serve me anymore. Thank you for what you've done, talking to that aspect of yourself. Thank you for trying to help me. I made you. But it's no longer needed. And then replace it with something better. But you can't do that if you don't know or acknowledge what actually is. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes perfect sense. Yes.
I just want to put this out here. You know, if you're struggling out there, you don't know which end is up. Maybe there's stresses in your life from things happening with the economy. Maybe there's all kinds of fears in your life because of strange things you've seen. Maybe because of the stress of the season. Don't give up on yourself. Everybody fails at things. I guarantee you, I have failed at more things than I have ever even thought of succeeding at. But that's where we learn. Don't beat yourself up over failing at something. Get up and do something to achieve that goal again, maybe using a different tactic. Just keep going and give yourself a bit of a break in the self-judgment. Because you know what? There's enough people out there that will point their finger at you and tell you what you cannot do. They'll tell you what you cannot have. They will tell you who you should even have relationships with. And then they will tell you what you should think, how you should feel. Guess what? All that means nothing. If you stop caring about what other people think of who you are, you actually become free to be who you are. Each one of us, if we're following our course, is not going to interfere with anybody else. Unless it was our will or theirs to experience that. Sometimes it happens. But what I'm saying, long story short, is don't give up on yourself. Remember that you are more than just a body. You're more than your thoughts. You're more than emotions. You are a part of the spark of consciousness that powers the entire multiverse. So keep going.
Good advice, especially for this time of year as well. Very difficult for people.
January 2025 rune reading preview. The full reading can be found on my Substack. The rune that I drew for the month of January is really a very beautiful rune to draw, especially in its upright position. It is one of the most life-affirming runes in the entire Futhark. It's very apropos considering it's the first month of the new year, the new cycle. Now, regardless whether we agree or disagree if the new year ought to start on January, our calendar that we all use happens to state that it is this month. And in spirit of that, it is indeed a very beautiful and synchronistic rune to have in this position. It's both defensive and protective. It is sometimes regarded as the rune of the Valkyries, who are sent by Odin to communicate with and help his chosen heroes on the path and the voyage towards the gate of Valhalla. It stands for the antlers of the stag, who uses those antlers to protect his herd from outside forces that may wish to prey upon it. When the antlers are pointed down, it can be symbolic of the death of the stag, which then leaves the herd without a protector. It's not uncommon for people to withdraw a little within themselves during this month, because I've had enough of the festivities, the social obligations, and the possible excesses of food and drink. After all that, we do tend to take a more withdrawn approach to life in general, which is very productive of our energies after having spent them perhaps a bit too liberally in the former month. The sober approach that can often herald in a time of self-reflection, reminiscent of people's New Year's resolutions. In these moments, we reflect on where we come from and where we want to go from here. Where our path ahead seems difficult, we often call upon our gods, or ancestral spirits, or our familiar spirits to lend us a helping hand, which is also how this rune is often used in magic, to function as a sort of antenna between our world and the world of the gods, to broaden our understanding and our capacity for communication with those gods. We humans have always had a need for spirituality. We have an innate need for ritual. If you do not believe this, just take a moment to think upon your morning routine. Do you always do the same thing in the same order? This is ritualistic behavior. And even if the purpose of it is not spiritual, it still functions as such, ritualistic. Do we feel a certain way, a bad way, when we relinquish that routine in favor of haste? It works the same for ritual for the purpose of spirituality. A vast majority of people feel a void in their life when they are cut off from all forms of spirituality, which is then filled with things that can never really compare, no matter how much we have of it, whether that is possessions, money, extracurricular substances, or intimate relationships. So it is a rune that tells you that it is a healthy thing for a human to indulge in your need for spirituality in your personal life, because it brings an extra dimension to our lives that cannot be replaced by anything else. We need to protect that personal line of communication we have with our gods and ancestors, because this itself strengthens one's life force and it nourishes the Hamingya. There are no downsides to allowing a healthy degree of spirituality in one's life. And what functions as healthy for a person, that is down to each individual for themselves to decide. No one knows you better than you know yourself.
I've just finished reading In Tune with the Infinite Mind by Talmage. It's my second read of this book and I absolutely love it. I spend a fair bit of time looking into subjects like the subconscious, quantum physics, and the paranormal, and this is one of those books that connects all of those subjects together, so I'm in my element when I'm reading it. And the book's main theme is that we're all connected to an infinite mind, a universal consciousness that is part of everything. And by tuning into it, we can access a field of knowledge, insight, and untapped potential. And it goes into how all the universe is energy, how it works, and how to get into it, and how to use it. And it also talks about how we are constantly being influenced by invisible, intelligent entities and how to recognize and deal with psychic attacks. And at the end of each chapter, there's questions and answers about that chapter, which the author said was the niggling questions that came up as he was writing and researching the book. And he said when he first started writing the book, that he found himself arguing the theories with an inner voice, which poo-pooed what he was writing. So rather than silence it, he decided to include the rational voice's questions at the end of each chapter with the author's answers, which I thought was a really nice touch. I think this book goes very well with the concepts I've already explored on Hocus Focus, especially the subconscious and the universal information field. The author doesn't just give you pretentious theoretical thoughts, he writes about how you can plug into this cosmic intelligence, and it's very similar to tuning into a frequency. I've also been reading about Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, and the infinite mind is like an expanded and more modern understanding of that. It's described here as a cosmic web of interconnectedness, where our individual minds are not isolated, but are part of a much larger unified force. This subconsciousness is where all the answers are stored. Another word for the Akashic records from a quantum perspective. And I love learning about consciousness, but it gets even more interesting in the book when Talmage puts this infinite mind with the paranormal phenomena. And you guys know I'm well into the unexplained, and I've always felt that paranormal experiences are ways of tapping into something beyond our normal understanding of what a paranormal experience is. Things like synchronicity, telepathy, and hauntings are part of that underlying field of consciousness. And these phenomena are not anomalies, but evidence that shows us how the infinite mind interacts with our individual minds and gives us a sneaky peek into the nature of reality itself. It's not supernatural, it's a natural phenomenon when looked at from a quantum level. The biggest thing I took from the book was how plugging into this universal force can bring about big changes in your life, and I discussed this with Neil MacDonald last month on my channel in relation to his new book, The Search for Ancient Wisdom. And you can overcome limiting beliefs and shed the baggage that's holding you back and get access to the confidence that comes from knowing that you're part of a much larger supportive force. So this book is a must read for anyone interested in consciousness, quantum physics, and the paranormal and how they all come together. And there's practical exercises in the book for tapping into this knowledge. And if you've ever wondered how you can access it and bring more meaning and understanding into your life, then I highly recommend this book.
Greetings and salutations. It's been a while. I hope you have had a fantastic Christmas and New Year and all that kind of thing. Welcome to the first Fireside Folktales. I'm Jade Melanie, if you don't know me already. And I would like to first of all introduce a friend of mine who is Stephanie Schofield. I met Stephanie quite a few years ago when I went to stay with her, and she's a fantastic author. And the first story that I would like to read a section of for you by the fireside is The Moon Glass. Once upon a time, there was a ghost who lived in a town called Slough. Her name was Sara Mondaini. For the last 7 of her 14 years, she had thought of herself as dead. Until today. No one noticed the grey wraith holding in an embrace the dying oak tree. Jarringly lurid joggers hurried by, heads down, seeing nothing but asphalt strip directly ahead. The misty drizzle, which blurred the gleam from the streetlights, irritated them but felt right to Sara. Tears for the oak, which had struggled so long to survive. But now, giving up, it was her favourite tree, her best friend. Through all those 7 years, it had welcomed her. Please hear me, please know, she pressed her cheek to the rough bark. Once upon a time, she had spoken with the trees and heard them when they talked back. Once upon a time, the world had been alive with magic, and no matter how many people told her that her memories were delusions, she knew in the deepest part of her that this hollow leaden world was not her world. The joggers had passed, the park was empty. She drew the folded letter from her pocket. Dear Ceridwen. The writing was a curly, old person sort of hand. I'm writing to you on behalf of your relation, Miss Elise Morgan. It is her wish that you come back to live with her in your home. The train tickets will bring you to Machylinath Station. Mr. Evans will meet you there. Yours sincerely, Mr. Eileen Jones, on behalf of Mrs. Elise Morgan. She'd read it countless times in the days since its arrival, trying to find a clue, a hidden message that might shed some light on the mystifying words. She could have thrown it away, assuming it was a hoax or worse, had it not been for one word, Ceridwen. Her name was Sara. Most people spelt it Kerry. She hadn't even realised Ceridwen was a name, but somewhere deep in the core of her being, in that part of her where the memory of magic held fast, a bell of recognition rang. Ceridwen. She took the letter away. Thank you for being my friend. She held her hand to the oak tree one last time. I don't know where this place is I'm going to. I don't even know how to pronounce it. But I have to go, don't I? She'd arrived at the station far too early. It was the first time she'd travelled alone, even though she knew it was silly. She couldn't get out of her head the fear, for if some reason she missed one of her trains and didn't arrive at the station, 1642, on the 30th of March, her chance to escape her life as a ghost in Slough would be lost forever. So she left the house 3 hours before her train was due to depart. Nancy, her latest foster carer, had given her a £5 note as she left. Get yourself something to eat on the train and call me when you get there. I'm not at all happy about all of this. She's my grandmother. It'll be fine. In truth, Sara had no idea her relationship with Elise Morgan, but she wasn't about to admit it. She'd told Nancy about the letter. In the next breath, stated that she was going no matter what. A compromise had been reached where Nancy would travel with her, despite not having the time, but to Sara's relief, a clash of dates with wedding invitation had swiftly put paid to the idea. No one noticed her at the station. She chose a dark corner to sit and wait, pulled up her grey hoodie to hide her face, took out a book. It was a good disguise. She was able to watch the people coming and going on the station concourse without anyone knowing she was watching. Without the hoodie, they would have seen her. Without the hoodie, people stared, and Sara hated it. It was the eyes. No one she had ever met had her eyes. They didn't belong in Slough. They were too green, not mottled hazel or watery blue-green, but green like an emerald. She looked up at the station's departure board. Platform 3. She double-checked, treble-checked. In the end, it was easy. The train arrived and she chose a seat by the window. Rain ran down the glass, scoring greasy lines in the grime, but she could still see well enough the grey, damp, stained blocks of flats that lined the track. She had lived in one of those for a few months, boxy brick houses. She'd watched them pass the train window like dirty TV screen. She'd lived in houses like that too. Her first home had been in one of those neat little brick cubes with her first foster parents, whose names she could no longer remember. She pushed the memory away. That was all past now. Houses followed more houses, vanishing only when the track sunk beneath low embankments. For the briefest of moments, she caught a glimpse of fields through the rainy veil, wintry greys, browns, despite spring's imminence. Then the houses were back. She had an hour at the next station to change trains, so used most of Nancy's parting gift to buy herself a sandwich and a drink. Her anxiety about missing connections or getting lost had evaporated as the train pulled out of Slough. Now that her journey had begun, she knew there was no going back, and that one way or another, whatever happened, she would find her way to the unpronounceable Machinillith and the mysterious Alice Morgan. Up until that moment of departure, a part of her had feared it was all a dream, that she could wake up to just another dreary day in the interminable chain of monotony. She managed to get another window seat and placed her bag beside her, hoping no one would ask to sit there and, worse still, try and talk to her. She had learnt over the years that silence was always the best approach. She'd been sent away from 2 foster homes for constantly telling lies when she wouldn't come back, from her insistence that animals and trees, the wind, river, rocks could talk to you. She'd been labelled a liar, disturbed, a fantasist, disruptive, attention-seeking. The list went on. Eventually she had learned just to say nothing, hide beneath the grey hoodie and save her words for the crows in the park and her oak tree. One more connection to go. With every mile that passed, she felt as though a weight was dropping from her shoulders. Birmingham. It was an unlikely place from which to catch the train to her future. Her eyes didn't see the stark concrete, plastic and metal, the grey-faced people. All she saw was the board announcing the platform from which her train would depart. Within half an hour, most of the other passengers had left the train and Seri was left alone in the carriage when the little train at last broke free from the seemingly endless urban sprawl. Green replaced grey, gently rolling hills swelled and dipped beyond the window. The train stopped now in smaller, gentler towns. Still English, but magic or no magic, she could feel something inside her begin to thaw, something that had been frozen within walls of ice that had thickened as the years had passed. And then she saw something that shattered the ice with one blow, a field of sheep, small sheep with long woolly tails, Welsh sheep. "Are you all right, dear?" The ticket collector was peering down at her with concerned eyes. "Yes, sorry," she fumbled for her ticket, only realising that tears were streaming down her face. The first tears she'd shed in a very long time. She was all right, more than all right, and she no longer felt like a ghost. That's just the beginning of the chapter of the Moon Glass. If you would like to hear the rest of this, I'm going to read this on my YouTube channel, which is Jade Melanie on YouTube, if you would like to come and join me there. And next time I will be searching for some old folk tales to read for you by the fireside. So until next time, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you again.
Well, we've come to the end of another episode and I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future content. It's only the click of the mouse to you, but it means the world to me and it really helps this channel to grow. And if you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please like and share the video as well. And Dan, I hope you enjoyed your time with me on Hocus Focus and that you'll consider coming back and doing another one in the future. It's been great to have you here and it's been lovely to work with you.
It's always a lot of fun. And I really enjoy being that. And yes, I'll be back if you'll have me. And I would like to say as well, thank you to all of those that are from our Patreon community that have been here. And for those that wonder what I'm talking about with there, you can go on the internet to patreon.com/TDP videocasts, and you'll see our private community. I do have a YouTube channel that I have sort of been on hiatus from, and it is coming back. So again, just look on YouTube, type in TDP Videocast, and it'll likely show you where the channel is, depending on what their algorithm is doing. And feel free, even before I've gotten back in the saddle there, to subscribe, and we can have some fun there too. But thank you once again, Sarah, for having me on.
No, you're welcome. And I'll put the links to Dan's Patreon and his YouTube channel in the description box for you guys to go and check out his work. And even if he is on hiatus from YouTube for a while, there's still a massive body of work there in both the video section and the live section. So there's hours and hours of stuff there to keep you busy. So now all that's left is the tarot of the month. And for the month of January, the tarot card that I've drawn is the Tower. And as we've talked about, the Tower card can make people squirm when it turns up in a reading. I mean, just look at it. This jagged structure that's being struck by lightning with flames erupting and people falling headfirst into what looks like the chaos below. It's not exactly a cozy cup of tea, is it? But before we jump to the doom and the gloom, let's just have a look at what this card's really saying, because as dramatic as it looks, the Tower has lots and lots of layers, just like an onion. So the lightning bolt that's there, well, that's divine intervention, a Luciferian moment of clarity, if you like, that big zap from the universe saying, oi, pay attention. And it's sudden and unexpected, and it's forcing the change whether you're ready for it or not. And the crown at the top of the tower is the ego being knocked down a peg or two. It shows that whatever you've built on, false pretenses or shaky foundations, they're all going to come crashing down sooner or later. And there's also 22 sparks falling from the flames, and that represents the 22 cards in the major arcana and the Hebrew alphabet, and the 22 paths of the tree of life, as we've learned today as well. Now, the falling figures represent us. The feeling of losing control, of being forced out of our comfort zone. And the flames in the image are not just destructive, they're actually very purifying, and they burn away what's no longer needed. And the tower's perfect. It's the perfect symbol of the shadow self. When we ignore the messy, unresolved parts of ourselves, we create this tower-like structure to protect the ego. But eventually that structure can't stay up, and the lightning bolts is the confrontation with the shadow, and the moment arrives when the subconscious forces us to deal with what we've been avoiding. Now, the card can also be tied to individuation, which was Jung's term for becoming your truest self. And sometimes it involves undoing the structures that don't serve us anymore, like beliefs or relationships or our sense of who we are. Now, when the tower appears in a reading, it's a bit of a heads up that something big is shifting, but it's not subtle. It's a cosmic shove, and it could be the collapse of a relationship or a career, or even a sudden revelation that changes everything. But it's not all bad. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's also a chance for a clean slate. A bit like decluttering the spare room. At first it's a mess and you're surrounded by dust and old stuff that's been thrown in there and forgotten about. But then after some hard work, you've got a nice clean space to rebuild and think and grow. And if you're resisting change, this card is symbolically saying, stop fighting it, because the change is happening whether you're ready or not. And if you've been in denial about something, then this is the universe's way of saying, the illusion is over. It's time to face the truth. And we know the world went through a huge tower moment back in 2020. And back then it felt like the ground beneath us gave way overnight, and it left many of us adrift, wondering what was coming next. But then when the dust began to settle, something remarkable happened. Things that had been hidden were suddenly illuminated, and we saw the cracks in the foundations and the illusions that have propped up so much of what we believe to be solid. And for the first time, we got a glimpse inside the tower and we saw what was holding it up. And it was a sobering moment for many of us when we realised that much of what we'd been clinging on to, systems, structures, even personal values, were all built on shaky ground. And not everyone was ready to accept that shift. Some people clung desperately to the familiar, even sacrificing their long-term well-being for short-term comforts, whether it was for the illusion of normalcy or the idea of a convenience, a pub, a holiday, a sense of control. Those things all became symbols of a time when many people were unwilling to let go of. But for most of us who accepted the upheaval, who leaned into the discomfort of that massive shift in awareness, the rewards have been life-changing. Letting go of the illusions have allowed us to rebuild on stronger, more authentic foundations. We've learned to value what truly matters and to continue on through life with a clarity that we didn't have before. And the tower may have seemed like a destruction at the time, but we all got out of the way instead of clinging on. And in its aftermath, it's given us the gift of truth and the opportunity to create a world that's more in line with who we are now, not who we were before. So what does the tower mean for this month? It's time to think about the shake-ups. They might not feel great at first, but trust that they're clearing the way for something better. Look at what's crumbling in your life. Is it a belief system? Is it a relationship? Or even a way of thinking? Whatever it is, let it go. It's a new year and it's a great time for new starts. So don't cling to the old when it's time to make space for the new. And if you're in the thick of a tower moment right now, remember that the flames burn, but they also cleanse. So on the other side of that destruction, there's clarity and there's growth. And there's you, ready to come back bigger and stronger.
So when you take a look at the Tower card and you see the destruction of the Tower card, realize that that's part of the creative process. Because in order for something new to be created, oftentimes the old has to be swept out of the way. And it's uncomfortable. But realize that is not the end. It is just a challenge that if you persevere through it, will bring you out stronger and with a brand new focus, with something that will be effective for you, rather than that which has outlived its usefulness. Good night, everyone. Until next time.
Good night, everybody.
Ginger fairies.